We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is, I think, under a lot of scrutiny for yesterday's performance, and I argue rightfully so. The 3 fumbles were costly. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm not saying the NFL has solved Lamar Jackson. I'm not overreacting to anything.
That's what it sounds like you're saying.
No, he's a very talented quarterback that made some crucial mistakes that I think ultimately cost him that game. That's a fact. Yeah. That fumble late was horrendous on third down when they could have punted and extended that game. And then as he was moving with that other fumble that he had earlier in that game before overtime, could have wrapped the ball up better and puts that one on the turf. Like, those 2 fumbles cost the Ravens the game, like, full stop. I do think that those are the concerns. And while everyone is roasting Daniel Jones for the turnovers that he has and the fumbles that he has, Lamar Jackson comes off a week where those fumbles were just inexcusable.
Yeah, I mean, there's never like an excuse for turnovers. There's never, no matter how
there
bad
is
situation.
For quarterback for picks. I mean, when it's tipped and all these different things.
Okay, yeah, but I'm
fine.
saying like turnovers that are your fault. There's no excuse for turnovers that are your fault.
And he had a lot.
But Ravens had the lowest pass blocking grade of any team in the NFL this past week. That their tackles, Alejandro Villanueva, we talked about Penei Sewell struggling with switch to right tackle. Alejandro Villanueva had no clue what he was doing out there. He was getting absolutely put in the turf any single time there was an obvious passing situation. He had no chance. And then add on to the fact that Ronnie Stanley probably had the worst game of his career. And an interesting thing I will get to, I'll just say it right now. I think the way the Raiders most teams go against the Ravens offensive line and kind of must rush, basically try to contain Lamar Jackson, keep him in the pocket. The Raiders were not. The Raiders were going inside moves with their edge guys. They were going hard speed rushes. They were not sort of respecting the rushing threat that is Lamar Jackson. They said, if he breaks the pocket, he breaks the pocket. We want to get pressure on him. It'll be interesting to see if other teams see that and the success that the Raiders had against those tackles and say, hey, maybe we send our edge guys at him too. Maybe we try to get that pressure on him too to rattle him. Maybe they are weak there and we can actually take advantage of this, because that last year you didn't see that nearly as often. So I think that is one thing that, the pass blocking was a little untenable. That was not, a lot of guys would have struggled with that, but I do think Lamar Jackson does shoulder his fair share of the blame in that scenario.
That's all I'm asking. I think some people come out of that game and say Lamar Jackson did everything he did to win that game, and maybe he did, but still gave up some costly turnovers. 2 fumbles that I think could have been avoided. Absolutely could have been avoided. The biggest issue, though, is what you hit on. Alejandro Villanueva and Ronnie Stanley both earned sub 50.0 pass blocking grade. They allowed 17 pressures between the 2 of them. It was like one of the worst tackle duo performances we've seen. Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby have 2 of the 3 highest pass rush win rates of any player in the NFL right now, because they were just teeing off on Stanley and Villanueva.
And those are good edge rushers. Don't get me wrong. They are not that caliber of edge. Like they should not have
Don't
been
tell them that.
Utterly unblockable the way they were. That a lot of that's still on the tackle.
And Yannick Ngakoue got hurt in the first half. Didn't even play this back half. That's why Carl Nassib played good reps for them too. Like, he earned a really high grade.
Basically anyone who got thrown out there was getting pressure.
Absurd. Defensively too, what was your takeaway from Martindale just locking in this cover 0? I mean, you were watching the Manning cast. We'll talk a little bit about that too. But they're like, every play is in cover 0. Again, cover 0. Again, cover 1. Again, like every time they're like, okay, we know it's man. And for most of the game, the Raiders receivers couldn't create separation to save their lives. Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs didn't have a target until deep into the third quarter reception. I think deep into the third or fourth quarter. But in the end of that game, you saw Brian Edwards show up, Henry Ruggs have that huge reception, and obviously Zay Jones comes free as Marlon Humphrey runs into another defender. I do think that it kind of exhausted that cover 1 or that heavy man coverage look, and eventually Derek Carr and company took over.
Yeah, I mean, they still didn't give up that many points. It wasn't like they got exposed by any means. I don't think it was that big a deal. It was just some you're running 2-man at the end, and like the 2-minute situation was where I'd more question, not the cover zero stuff. That's kind of their bread and butter. That's what they do. So I didn't really, I wouldn't be too critical of that. I thought they had success with it early on enough to where it wasn't a big deal.
Other highlights in this game, Colton Miller, one of the highest graded offensive tackles in the NFL right now after what was a really, really outstanding performance for him. Derek Carr and Darren Waller, they were targeting, Derek Carr was targeting Darren Waller to the point where it's being memed, and probably rightfully so. It was absurd. But your opinion of Derek Carr's performance in this game? I saw it as the tale of 3.5 quarters versus the last half of this game, where he started really shaky, really inaccurate, which is uncharacteristic to Derek Carr. But then as the game progressed, specifically late in the fourth quarter, just showed up in a huge way, strike after strike after strike, specifically those tosses to Bryan Edwards. I've said this probably multiple times on this podcast, 5+ times. Derek Carr is the best player on this football team. And when you include positional value over Darren Waller, if you want to argue talent. He is the best player on this football team. He's a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. Borderline top 10 when he's hitting. The reason the Raiders are 4-point dogs in this game at home, the reason the Raiders are they're plus 300 to make the playoffs, is because this roster is horrendous. Now, they showed up against the Baltimore Ravens. Can they continue to exceed expectations? It'll be interesting. But Derek Carr, I think, will continue to ball out like he did.
I do have to give a hat tip to Mike Mayock, because the signings of Casey Hayward, KJ Wright, Yannick Ngakoue all came up big in this one. Like, those were all like shit. Those look like 3 of their best defensive starters right now, and that's obviously also an indictment of how he's drafted in recent years. But those 3 guys, those 3 signings over the course of this offseason, I think are going to massively improve this Raiders defense. Again, it's going to be difficult to not improve, but I think just what they bring to the table is something that they've been missing at all 3 of those positions.
I mean, all they had to do was make Cleveland Ferrell healthy and active and played David Arnett one snap for this defense to improve. I mean, you put on veteran free agents. You're going to perform better given the performance of these rookies. So I'm not all that surprised by that. When you replace David Arnett and Cleveland Ferrell with actual productive players like Casey Hayward and Yannick Ngakoue, you're going to see success.
How much do you think Marlon Humphrey wants to kill Chris Westry? Or how did he even look at him in the locker room after that?
I don't think so.
After that blast, he got picked. Obviously, Westry picks him on the last play, the touchdown to Zay Jones, where, I mean, that's Marlon Humphrey. You have no chance at that point. We put the coverage stats on him, but we don't downgrade a guy in that scenario because, shit, you can't. Like, that is, he got screwed by Chris Westry. Chris Westry should be, even though not technically responsible, that was his fault in that last touchdown.
Humphrey did tweet out, I think it's crazy feeling giving up the game-winning touchdown, and he's talking about specifically.
And then did he tag Chris Westry?
I don't know. He didn't tag Chris Westry. Did you see the tweet I sent out of him absolutely destroying Hunter Renfrow for fun on that play in the beginning?
Yeah, when a quarterback breaks the pocket, you gotta be wary of that. Cornerback, that's like the Richard Sherman from back in the day against Devontae Adams.
A couple more things before we get to the college football slate here. We're doing a full college football review. The Manning cast, I don't have a lot to say about it outside of it was objectively better than honestly any other. I was paying attention to the broadcast, which I rarely do. And I pay attention to that broadcast because it was objectively better than other stuff that I've seen.
So I love it. Okay, I'm just like more of a take on announcers in general. It's just, I feel like everyone likes the announcers that are prepared and know the game and know like what's going on. It's like not that difficult. I don't want to say it's like to be good at it, but it's just so many guys seemingly mail it in, don't have a handle on the schemes, the players, the whatever, when like that's their job. Like you can tell the quality difference when someone actually knows what's going on in a football game and when they don't. And that's kind of, obviously Peyton and Eli or Peyton especially is very entertaining as a human being, but more just like them knowing like, it's not even just X's and O's, but basically like how the game works is it's so refreshing compared to just 95% NFL broadcast.
I will say it can be cleaned up a ton. It was obviously a bit of a circus trying to get to commercial breaks.
It was like a circus though. Like I would have liked it to be less
chaotic.
Yeah.
It was chaotic but entertaining. It was also super new, and I think a lot of people took to that. They did not comment on the game a ton, and I do think they knew what was going on in the game, but something that I do think it was lacking was like just overall like player knowledge. Neither Manning even knew who Zay Jones was on that reception. So and I don't think that doesn't concern me, but I do think to the average fan, I think it was a broadcast for high-end football fans who don't need people describing what the play is from a high level.
In their handheld.
Yeah, you don't need your handheld that you can see the play, you know what happened. You don't need a comment on every single play, a play-by-play on every single play. But when you want this high-level or in-depth conversation about going for it and all these things, when they had Russell Wilson on, I thought that was utterly fantastic. I'm excited to watch more of that moving forward. Last thing here, friend of the show, going down after 2 weeks. Top 25 team according to PFF's power rankings. USC fires Clay Helton, a new era in USC. Let's not focus too much on Helton leaving. Talk to me about.
Focus on Helton leaving.
Talk to me. Okay, go ahead.
6 years there. Or was it 7 years? 6 years after being interim for like a half year. 0. Like the fact they lasted this long. The fact that you allowed him last year, then 2 games into this year. Malpractice on USC's part.
What was their expectation?
Yeah, because that was. For it to get better just immediately overnight, I don't know, but that was not like that. They are in shambles. I'm curious to see if they can really pull a big name to USC.
What's the big name you want?
That's the other thing.
USC?
Is like who would be the big name? Everyone's going to say Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's not going to fucking leave for USC. And Brady Quinn tweeted out he could have left for USC last year if you want, or he could have had it last year if he wanted to. So knowing that, it would be very doubtful if he does that. It's 1 game into his NFL coaching career. That would be utterly absurd. But I think the name that I would be the most intrigued by is Matt Campbell, Iowa State. I know Bruce Feldman put out a list of names. Most likely candidates included Mario Cristobal from Oregon, Luke Fickell from Cincinnati, obviously Campbell, James Franklin from Penn State, and Tony Elliott from Clemson, the offense coordinator there. I think Campbell's the one I'd be most intrigued by because he's obviously way overachieved considering talent level at Iowa State. You know, they don't have a recruiting base. They don't have a tradition. They don't have shit much out there in names, but they've won games. So I'd be intrigued by him. I think the more likely one's probably Fickell, though.
Fickell to USC would be sick. For him, obviously, I know the University of Cincinnati loves the guy, and they already lost Marcus Freeman to Notre Dame. Yeah. So I think having the heir apparent removed, and I think Luke Fickell, though, now that they're moving to the Big 12, there could be a legitimate opportunity for him to stay there and build a team forward. So a couple other names: Billy Napier, ULM, friend of the pod. Friend of the pod. And then also Jamie Chadwell, another friend of the pod, maybe getting their jobs at USC should be a treat.
Who's your biggest friend of the pod that you want to see at USC? Not like, doesn't have to be realistic. Eli.
Drinkwitz is my guy, literally my blood.
Were you crying when they lost to Kentucky?
I literally shed tears. It was a tough scene. You were right next to me. It was literally crying tears. Shall we get to our reactions to the college football top 25?
Yes, sir.
That was a fun catch and early buzz segment, by the way. A lot of Monday Night Football takes, a lot of good times. All right, reactions to the college football top 25. I'm going to read off the top 10. According to the AP poll, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Oregon, after a big upset win that we were on the field for over Ohio State. They are number 4 now, right behind Oklahoma, Georgia, and Bama. Then big win over Iowa State, upset win, 4.5-point dogs. Iowa jumps up to 5. Clemson's now at 6. Texas A&M at 7, even though they just barely squeaked out a win over Colorado. Cincinnati at 8, Ohio State down to 9, and then Penn State at 10. Give me your overvalued team and your undervalued team in the AP top 25.
I still think Notre Dame at 12 is overvalued.
Wow.
I'm doing it. I hate to do it, but they went to overtime with the team that just lost to an FCS team in Florida State. And then they needed a touchdown within the final minute to beat Toledo. This is a flawed roster at a number of positions. They are still not on the defensive side of the ball. Marcus Freeman's still not kind of got his feet underneath him with the talent that they have, scheming to that talent and what that all takes. So I'm worried, I'll say, about Wisconsin coming up, Cincy coming up, some other teams in their schedule. So Notre Dame at 12, I think is overvalued, but there are some other teams up there overvalued as well.
Yeah, I think Iowa is a name. I think a lot of people will say is overvalued just because so much of their success has been predicated on some volatile areas of play, some defensive touchdowns, not necessarily stellar quarterback play. And you could say the same for Texas A&M. Like Texas A&M does not have a good situation under center, and when you're trying to compete with the big dogs and be a top 4 team, you need to have kind of that next level player at quarterback. But I think the team I am going to highlight is actually a little bit further away, Arizona State, which is at 19. 2-0, yes. 30th ranked team in PFF's power rankings. They have not, in my opinion, even met relatively high expectations, preseason expectations in the games that they have played. I think they're not necessarily fraudulent, but I don't expect them to be a top 20 team for much longer as we move forward.
They lose against BYU this weekend?
They could. I think they could lose against BYU. I think BYU looked really good against the Utah Utes. Utes, I thought were going to cover that number and win that game, and they did not. I think BYU, I think they've reloaded along the offensive line. They got Tyler Algier.
Algier's a horse. I guess
a horse.
Monster.
Absolute horse. All right, your undervalued team in the top 25.
They got jumped by two different teams, and is your Cincinnati hometown Bearcats. We've talked about how they're actually loaded with NFL talent, more so than, you'd think about group of 5 teams being not necessarily on par talent-wise. Maybe they have like a schematic advantage is why they go undefeated or end up making like a bigger bowl. But no, Cincinnati actually can punch you in the mouth. They got the horses to do so. Now, their offensive line's still an issue, but they have a quarterback who's going to get drafted. They have a receiver who's going to get drafted. They have a tight end who's going to get drafted. They have multiple, probably 4 or 5 guys on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to have probably top 5 to 6 amount of drafted prospects of any school in the country. They are, for my money, better than Texas A&M, better than Iowa, better than Oregon. Just from a talent perspective. I think they are at number 8. When you're getting jumped, I think maybe a little unfairly at this point.
I'm going to do something for our producer, David Sofaro. I got an undervalued team that I think he's going to like this. I hate
this already.
Michigan is a bit undervalued. Just cracked the top 25. They have a top 10 offense in EPA per play, top 25 in the Power 5, top 20 in EPA per play allowed on defense. Aiden Hutchinson coming off a monster game over Washington where they were 6-point favorites and blew them out at home. Michigan, I'm not saying is back, but I think they're undervalued at 25. I think they're better than a lot of the other teams that are slightly above them. I think they're better than Arizona State. I think they're better than Arkansas. I think they're better than Coastal Carolina. I think this is a very good football team. I think Michigan continues to climb up the ranks. I like Michigan this year. And I'm not preseason. I would put the line Ohio State, Michigan at like -30 in favor of Ohio State. But it's in Ann Arbor this year. And we've talked a lot about Ohio State, and CJ Stroud has not played well. That's a big reason they lost that Oregon game. We can talk about that. But that offensive line also got beat up without Kayvon Thibodeau. Defensively, they're the second worst team in the Power 5 in the EPA per play allowed through 2 weeks. This Ohio State defense did not look good. This Ohio State offense has flaws. They have a really good receiving core, and that's just about it. The spread's still going to be largely in favor of Ohio State. They are the better football team. I'm not saying Michigan is better, but oh, buddy, let's not sleep on Go Blue.
Yeah, they have a lot of talent defensively. I still think offensively, I'm not buying it. I mean, Cade McNamara passed for 44 yards. He went 7 to 15 for 44 yards against Washington.
You don't need to when you got Blake Corum.
Washington straight burning one of the best secondaries in the country this year with a dog shit offense because they've allowed like 150 yards passing through 2 games.
Yikes.
And lost both. That is kind of that's difficult to do, honestly. So, yeah, I can't. Actually, 149, not even 150. But yeah, I think Michigan, until I see it from Cade McNamara, I'll pump said brakes on them being undervalued. But 25, but their defense is legit. I'll say that.
All right, before we get into our top performers from College Football Week 2 and review some of the risers and fallers, let's get into our DraftKings sponsor. Week 1 may be over, but the season's just getting started at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off Week 2, DraftKings is giving new customers $200 in free bets instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Simple enough. Listen up because you don't want to miss this. Head to DraftKings Sportsbook app now and place a bet of $1 on any Week 2 game to receive $200 in free bets instantly. If Sportsbook is not yet available in your state, DraftKings still has huge cash prizes up for grabs all season long with their daily fantasy contest. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with the first deposit. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 years or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. 1 per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. We are on to our top performers, and I'm going to kick this thing off. We talked a little bit about him on the Monday episode. We're going to bring it home here on the Wednesday episode. Quarterback Sam Howell. Mm-hmm. was an absolute baller. And who are they playing? Austin P. Austin P, one of the worst programs in all of college football, but still super impressive as a thrower. He obviously had that dime deep ball. That was your cake your pants moment from Monday's episode. But honestly, I was kind of stunned how much North Carolina leverages him as a runner. He had that long rushing touchdown that I did not expect him to have the wheels to do that. And I know not a lot of people on Austin P are running 4.3s or 4.4s, but still, he looked like legit a weapon as a runner for North Carolina. It was also a big bounce back week for him.
He's not going to be a runner in the NFL.
He's not going to be a runner in the NFL, but I think he's got sneaky athleticism.
Oh, don't you dare.
Sneaky. No, I think he's fast. I mean, he looks fast. I mean, he's definitely not an athlete.
I bet he runs a 4.75.
Fair enough.
Which, I mean, that you can run an option run with him. Like you'll have to respect it.
I think Austin P had to respect it because he looked really good as a runner. Obviously looked good.
Like I don't feel like I feel the same way about Spencer Rattler, who's next on this list, where you're not going to involve him in your run game. Like you're not going to run a quarterback power with him too much, but you have to respect him. And when he breaks the pocket, you have to respect that. And that's how I feel about Sam Howell.
Obviously, Sam Howell went against low-level competition, but I know you highlighted Howell as a bit of a faller after week 1. Where's your head at with Howell now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about that game at all.
Really?
I mean, it's Austin P. I mean, those throws are sick. We know he has a cannon. It's more about, like, what does he do when it's difficult?
Yeah.
Has been the issue. Last year's Notre Dame game, obviously last week against Virginia Tech, and some more games on the schedule this year. We'll see.
Spencer Rattler, I know another guy that we've highlighted as having a tough week 1 performance this week, again, against low-level competition. So was Tulane, though. 91.7 PFF grade. I thought it looked really good in this one, too.
Yeah, I mean, we're waiting for the real games on the schedule before we're actually going to care about what – so he's gone through 2 weeks now without a big-time throw because that's just the Oklahoma offense. Mm-hmm. He's put up ridiculous stats. 75.8 completion percentage through 2 weeks, but it's just been too easy. And for him to have, like I said, 3 turnover plays last week, obviously none this week, but it's Western Carolina. So we will go TBD until some real compo for him. 2
quarterbacks going against cupcake competition. I think you'll see that a lot with some of the highest graded players in college football.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Corral had a good week this past week, but you're also playing, gosh, who did he even play at? Something Alabama State maybe. Like you're just not until these guys are in the conference schedule, which was a nice part about last year when you had not a lot of cupcakes on their schedules. But until we see some real deal competition, we're just not gonna know.
What about Ike Ekwonu? We watched that tape on the drive back from Columbus, putting everyone in an absolute blender. He's one of the highest graded offensive tackles in the country right now for NC State. Another really, really impressive game as a run blocker, but also keeping relatively clean sheets in pass protection.
Yeah, now this was a guy that I highlighted who was going to be on the biggest riser list because 58 pass blocking snaps, not a single pressure. The best pass blocking performance of his career for my money. Now, it's Mississippi State. It's an SEC team. It's not an SEC team known for their defensive end talent. It's obviously Mike Leach, not known for producing a lot of defensive talent. He was not going up against necessarily guys that are really going to threaten him, but you got to block those guys too. You got to win against those guys too, and he absolutely dominated in that one. So that was – I still don't think he stays at tackle, but the more games like that, the more I can be talked into him possibly staying at tackle because he's playing obviously all left tackle this year.
He's got, I think, the highest or one of the highest positively graded run block percentages of any tackle or any offensive lineman really in the country right now. Yeah, he did that against Mississippi State. The other piece of that, too, is there's a play at 7:39 in the fourth quarter where he literally drives. It's a pass protection rep, but he ends up driving the defensive end like 16 yards down the football field, puts him in the turf, and gets called for a personal foul, still earning an 87.1 grade despite the foul.
Game to watch for him. 2 weeks. Clemson. There you go. That's the one you want to watch.
Next one on my list here, Dante Demas Jr., friend of the pod, Maryland receiver. Yes, they went against Howard, but still, I thought what was interesting here is he had a different level of usage against Howard. They kept him a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, a lot lower average depth of target this week, can show he could do some stuff after the catch against Howard. Also had a touchdown where he stared down the cornerback for a good 15 seconds. I thought that was pretty nice. 87.0 PFF grade. I know Dante is also high on your list.
Yeah, this is a guy who I liked him going into the season. I got talked out of putting him in the top 100, but he's in the top 100 now. He might be the biggest riser at the receiver position that I've seen so far this year. And obviously not top competition yet, but just at 6'3", damn near 220 pounds, how quickly he gets off the line of scrimmage. I'm very intrigued. I think that he's going to be a 4-4 guy at that size, and that'll get you drafted pretty highly. Not a lot of guys that size running 4.4s go in like the 5th, 6th. You go in the 3rd, 4th if you're that, and he could even go higher than that.
Absolute stud, Demas Jr. for Maryland. Next one on my list, I bucketed all these guys because they went against some of the worst tackles in college football, but they graded really well. And I thought, continue to check boxes. We talk a lot about competition. You have to do it against when you're going against terrible offensive tackles. It's expected that you grade well. Let's highlight those performances. Not every highly regarded edge defender in college football going against cupcake competition graded like these folks. Nick Benito of Oklahoma, George Karlaftis of Purdue, and Kingsley Enagbare of South Carolina all played really, really good football. Karlaftis specifically only played, I think, the first half against UConn, dominated. Nick Benito has an array of moves, is super athletic, and super slippery to block, specifically in run defense. He had another good game as well. And then Kingsley, largely unblockable for South Carolina this past week. Another really impressive performance for him.
Yeah, I really can't wait to see testing numbers for Benito and Enagbare because they're both just so they physically dominate tackles. Like they don't get touched sometimes. Like they are just that level of explosive. And now Are they going to be like 4-5 guys, or are they going to be like 4-7 guys who just have a little bit of quicks and maybe don't have necessarily the pure explosiveness to threaten at the NFL level?
Enagbare, 7 total pressures against East Carolina this past week. He had probably the best competition of any of those edges I just listed, but still some cupcake competition for all of them.
Yeah, he was just playing with guys.
Yeah. Last one here, and this is a good segment into your biggest risers segment, but one of the top performers, another edge player, and I didn't bucket him with the others because he actually went against some legit competition for Washington. Jackson Kirkland, the left tackle for Washington, dominated. 80.1 PFF grade for Aiden Hutchinson in this game. Multiple really, really impressive pass rushing reps. Also looked good against the run. The commentators in that game literally had just what consistently talked about Hutchinson, and for good reason. Obviously, a Bruce Sullivan's freaks list guy, a guy that we've talked about a ton, a guy that returned to school to do exactly what he's doing now, rise up draft boards.
Yeah, he was overpowering Kirkland. He was the much more physically developed of the two. Like he was the stronger. Like he was just anything he wanted to do, he was pretty much getting in that game. Hutchinson's not making it out of the top. Well, we'll get to that when we get to the segment later on. We'll just say
Hutchinson's next segment, bro. Let's talk about it now.
Well, that's not even this segment that we're getting to later on. But Hutchinson, he's playing a lot pure edge this year. Like he was kind of their guy who would kick inside last year, and I thought he could excel in kind of a 3-4 defensive end type of role. But now I almost like him as like the way how talented he is at kind of setting up opposing tackles. I like him as just like a pure that outside defensive end. Don't even worry about kicking him inside because this guy can make a difference at that spot.
His PFF grade also has improved like every year of his career. 90.5 PFF pass rushing grade through 2 games, Western Michigan and Washington. 10 total pressures. My goodness. The guy off to a stellar start, and I think he's going to be a guy we consistently talk about into the offseason, into April. All right, next on your biggest risers list, we already talked about him too, but Dante Demas Jr. The top performers and biggest risers.
You stole some on here. Demas, one of the biggest risers. I said Ekwonu, like what he's done at left tackle and pass protection this year, definitely rising at boards. And then the next one here I'll highlight, Chris Rodriguez, Kentucky. And now, a couple fumbles. Never going to be good, but fumbles is more of a sample size thing. We've talked about that. Fumbles, drops, you want to see one in a game is not necessarily impactful to your draft status. Now, one every couple games for a whole season, that can be impactful to your draft status, but really hasn't been an issue. Didn't fumble once last year, so I'm not super worried about it yet. But 204 yards, 27 carries, 5 broken tackles, just churning yards after contact, damn near 4 yards after contact. I think he has a little more juice. I think he's slimmed down a bit from what he was last year and has a little more home run, big play ability in his game, and even as a receiver looks a little bit better. So I think now he's obviously going to be limited in that regard, and you kind of know what you're getting into for guys 5'11", 225, but if you're looking for a power back in this class, he might be the top guy.
Can we get a quick break in the risers and fallers segment before I touch it? James Palmer of NFL Media just said on national TV that Tyreek Hill is the best deep threat in NFL history. After Anthony Tresh, an analyst here at PFF, got legitimately put on a barbecue. I think I saw multiple memes of him on a barbecue for having that same take. Now, James Palmer, for whatever reason, is not getting the same hate. I'm not sure why, but here we are. That's
is, not even might be.
No, he is, yeah.
Wow.
Which is impressive. I think a lot of people will come to defend James Palmer before they come to defend Anthony Tresh, but we'll see. We'll absolutely see. For C-Rod, how do you, some of the concerns I have, I know he's a friend of the pod, but what about the long speed?
I said it wasn't, I thought it's a little bit better this year. Like I said, I thought he slimmed down a touch. It's never going to be good, but Najee Harris isn't good. Josh Jacobs isn't good. The amount of power backs who have long speed is like Saquon Barkley. That's why he was the alien that went number 2 overall. There's not a lot of dudes that are in the 225 plus range that you can count on to hit home runs.
And where would you play DeMarvin Leal at the next level?
So next biggest riser here, DeMarvin Leal against Colorado. Monster game. I mean, pretty much unblockable in the run game. And the biggest thing why I loved this tape and probably one to go back to, 18 snaps in the interior. He was that versatile guy in this. We've talked about the Texas A&M defensive end. He's 290 plus pounds, 6'4", but they play him at edge, where there's not a lot of 290 plus pound guys at edge in the NFL. So where is he going to end up? His tape on the interior, double teams, a little bit of an issue, but man, he was good against guards. I want him going up against guards as a pass rusher. I thought how he wins with his hands, so much pop in his hands, that is going to play. That's where I want to see him. And 18 reps at defense tackle in this game. Very impressive on them.
I think the word I came away with watching his tape this week was just control. Like never felt out of control, even against Colorado. Yep. Just completely in control on run snaps and pass snaps. He was a monster for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks now, just continues to dominate. Before we get to the biggest faller segment, we're getting news breaking left and right, and I apologize. And I know that James Palmer one wasn't that big of news, but Eric Bieniemy is emerging as a top candidate for the USC job. He's from Southern California.
Oh.
As people, Adam Schefter was reporting this from league sources that USC has been one of the college jobs that would interest him. Your immediate reaction?
No, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about the NFL ranks, but for a team like USC, that would appeal for them. Mm-hmm. Like you think about the 04, 05, that range of teams. It was Pete Carroll was, former coach in the NFL, former coach with the Patriots. He was trying to develop NFL talent. That's what appealed to that program. I think getting another guy who came from the NFL is going to be like, you're going to get a ton of offensive talent. You're going to get a ton of offensive recruits if you get a guy who was Patrick Mahomes' offensive coordinator for sure. So that's interesting. I would love to see. Hate to see that as a Notre Dame fan.
Hate to see that. Biggest fallers, kick us off.
Biggest fallers. First one here, I will go Michael Wright, the Oregon cornerback, because my God. Now I do want to know if they told him just don't get cooked deep, because he was giving up so much space underneath to those two, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. But 8 catches on 11 targets, 130 yards, a touchdown. And now some of that, the touchdown was the play, the infamous looking at his wristband as the ball is snapped. Garrett Wilson just runs right by him. But he just was not ready to be in the same stratosphere as Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. He was not at that level quite yet. And so the guy had high hopes going into the season. It's just kind of like that was late day 2 tape. That was not a guy who could be around 1 tape. Yeah, now it's early in the season, but that was kind of what I saw from him against obviously the 2 best wide receivers in college football.
And honestly, since we're talking more about that game, the number 3 in that offense is also damn good. Jackson Smith-Njigba was a monster in that game. I thought he's like kind of that next line for Ohio State after Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson entered the draft. But buddy, he has got some speed. He was consistently creating separation. Also was like C.J. Stroud's favorite target in that game. So that's another talented receiver to watch for Ohio State. That Oregon secondary didn't have a ton of it. I mean, people talk about Stroud not playing well. Yes, he was inaccurate, but he still had over 400 yards. Was getting a lot of what he had. All right, next follower on this list is who?
Next follower is going to be Cade Otton, the Washington tight end. If you'll think back, that was one of the questions. Hey, what do you think about Cade Otton? And while he's probably a plus athlete for the tight end position. Tight end is still a very much also a ball skills driven position. He goes 1 of 5 in contested catches. Just did not look strong at the catch point in that game against Michigan. Could have considered one of them a drop. I don't think we ended up charting it as one, but man, you want tight ends to win in those situations consistently, and to go 1 of 5 was not great for him.
Consistently targeted in that offense. So 19 targets, 11 receptions for 115 yards so far through 2 weeks. Going against some good defenses in Michigan and Montana. Not Montana, but this. How much of this is Otten, and how much of this is just this awful, putrid Washington offense?
I mean, I'm just saying those were on. A lot of those were actually not even in bad spots, a handful of those throws, which is surprising. But Otten, not a great day at the office.
Last one, Texas's DeMarvion Overshone, who there's a lot of high hopes around Texas this week. I know Anthony Tresh on the College Football Live show was big on Texas, big on Hudson Card. Hudson Card now sent to the bench, and DeMarvion Overshone showing up on the followers list for you. Yeah,
so Marvin Overshone's a 6'4", 223-pound linebacker. Started his career off at safety, played linebacker the past couple seasons, and he was kind of why they lost this game against Arkansas. They were running light boxes, trying 5-6 man boxes up front, trying to stop the outside screen game, that sort of thing, and basically saying we'll stop the run well enough. Well, they didn't. They did not have guys who were making plays in the run game. Overshone 4 missed tackles on 9 attempts. Almost half his tackles in the game he missed was getting blocked by tight ends cleanly, taken out of plays by guys that, Arkansas offensive line, not awful by any means, but this isn't Bama's O-line they're going up against. This isn't, a number of future day 1, day 2 type of picks. You should not be getting blocked that cleanly, and Overshone just had himself a nightmare of a game.
Rough to see. And everyone end up on the followers list, which is just what you never want to see as we head into college football week 3. But you also have some other lists that you hate to get on. Before we get to those, I have to let the people know about Home Field Apparel, a proud sponsor of the Tailgate podcast. Home Field Apparel is a premium collegiate clothing brand out of Indianapolis. Incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. Home Field is in the middle of Big News Saturday, Season 2, where they launch a new school collection every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern for 16 weeks straight. They just recently released Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida, and they'll be releasing another this Saturday. I'm wearing, obviously, the San Diego State tee, which you freaking love to see, and you're wearing Wisconsin National Champs, repping Home Field Apparel. Use promo code PFF to get 15% off your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. That is promo code PFF for 15% off. Get ready for college football tailgate season. On to Bus Watch.
Yes.
This is an easy one. This one's probably been a bust for a while now. Go ahead.
Clelin Ferrell, the number 4 overall pick, was a healthy scratch in week 1 this year. And we talked about, he's a backup. It's like, okay, Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue, it's like a pretty solid edge deal. There's no shame in necessarily being third fiddle to those guys.
Even though Crosby was drafted in the 4th round after he was drafted.
Crosby's very good, though. Like, I even said what I say after their rookie years. I'm like, I'd rather have Crosby. He was the better athlete. He was more productive as a rookie. There's nothing that says that he shouldn't be the better one right now. But Ferrell, if Ferrell was drafted where we had him, a lot of people had him, mid kind of second round type of player, this wouldn't be that big a deal. But you drafted him number 4 overall. And so for a number 4 overall pick to be a healthy scratch in year 3, week 1, I don't think there's any way he's not a bust at this point for the expectations set.
Exactly.
With the number 4
exactly. And I almost tweeted this yesterday, but Raiders fans can be frantic. Clelin Ferrell did not bust. Mike Mayock busted. This is a player that you look at who was, where he was positioned on average, the consensus board, I consistently reference. Not a single person had him anywhere near 4th overall. And again, it's being overconfident in your evaluation of this specific player to draft him at number 4 overall rather than taking other players in that range that other people have seen as talented players. Brian Burns, for example, who's on an absolute tear after week 1, or Josh Allen, a much better player, more productive, at least not a healthy scratch. Instead, you take Clelin Ferrell, and he is now a healthy scratch for your football team. And then the other piece of this, too, that we didn't bring up, I'm not saying he's on bus watch yet, but David Arnett played 1 snap in that game. Played 1 snap after being a first rounder, not 2 years ago, 1 year ago. He's a first rounder a year ago. Damon Arnett plays 1 snap behind Casey Hayward. Nate Hobbs, the rookie out of Illinois, got more snaps, more play than Damon Arnett did. Damon Arnett was playing special teams like that. Yeah. And you'll hear John Gruden talk about it doesn't matter where you were drafted. We're playing the best players. And that's fine. But you only get so much money. You only get so much, let's go to the Office reference. Your mom gives you $5 to start a lemonade stand. You use $4.50 on Cleveland Ferrell and Damon Arnett, and then you make a good football team out of the last 50 cents. That doesn't mean you're successfully running the stand. That means you're shitting the bed with the first $4.50, as they have with Cleveland Ferrell, Damon Arnett, these two picks on their way to being bust. I would agree with you, though, that Cleveland Ferrell, any player drafted in the top 5 that has a healthy scratch week 1 into his 3rd season in the NFL is not a W by any means. Yeah. And I'd argue that Gruden's, it doesn't matter where you're drafted, we just play you. I just don't know necessarily. That's a good reason still to draft him.
So Ferrell firmly on bust watch, but we're going to add a new bust watch to the bust watch, which is Hall of Fame bust.
I like that.
So we're adding guys who have good performances, maybe later in their career, and we debate, are they Hall of Famers?
We can't do this every week. You think?
Yeah, I mean there's going to be. And this week, I think the only name that qualifies strongly for this is Chandler Jones, Arizona Cardinals. Do you know where he ranks among active players in terms of sacks?
I'm going to say 6th.
2nd.
Wow.
Von Miller first, who first ballot Hall of Famer. If you listen to the Hall of Fame episode, we said that one already. But he has more than J.J. Watt. Wow. He was drafted the year after J.J. Watt and has one more sack than J.J. Watt. Obviously, 5 sacks last week helped that.
And played a lot more games.
Yes, and J.J. Watt being injured. But still, Hall of Fame is a sort of statistically driven award or honor given, most likely, more often than not. And so he's 31st all-time in sacks. And now they've only been tracking sacks since 1982, but still 31st all-time. He could very easily climb with 2 more productive seasons into the top 20. And I think if you're a top 20 sacks all time, I think there's not a lot of guys I'm looking at in this top 20 that aren't going to be Hall of Famers.
Yeah, I like Hall of Fame bust watch, not calling him a lock like we do with some of the other segments, but at least entering the conversation for sure. I think the other piece of this game, too, we didn't talk a lot about the Chandler Jones game, but he did it against legit offensive tackles and Taylor Lewan, and also did it. These were not, chase, what do we call those? Pursuit sacks. These were like legitimate wins. This guy was.
There's one that was unblocked that he but it was him recognizing that was a stretch play fake, and he went right to the quarterback instead of chasing the stretch.
He was utterly impressive, and I would argue that I like where your head's at with the sacks all time. I think he's on his way.
And I will say about Chandler Jones 2 things. One, he has a game that should age gracefully. He's 31 years old, but he does not win with first step quicks. He does not win with pure athleticism. He wins with the fact that he has damn near 36-inch arms and that he is so technically sound and has one of the best approaches of any pass rusher in the NFL. So he should theoretically be able to play into his mid-30s, health obviously barring there, and still be productive. And 2, he clowns the elite tackles in the NFL as much as any defensive end in the NFL. Like, he doesn't necessarily, he's not going to go out and if he's facing I'm trying to think of just a bad starting left tackle, a Julian Davenport for the Indianapolis Colts, he's not necessarily going to every single play win. Like, he doesn't have that one go-to move that's going to beat you every single time. But against Tyron Smith, against a Trent Williams, against a Teron Armstead, he will beat those guys more than your run-of-the-mill, your other high-end pass rushers. He has that sort of move set and is one of the most respected pass rushers in the league. So I do think Chandler Jones, Hall of Fame bust, I'd put it more likely than not trajectory-wise.
What about a third bust? I have one. Should the Cardinals bust open the checkbook and give him that extension he's won?
I thought you were going to bring up like Johnny Sins or something.
Stop. What do you think? Should they pay him? I mean, now he's kind of forcing their hand. I mean, this guy's on a tear.
That's tough. That one is tough because like I said, I think you'll age gracefully. They should have addressed that one prior to the season.
Prior to the 5-sack game? Probably. Yeah. Price just went the fuck up for Chandler Jones. Yeah. His agent is counting the percentages he's improving.
I would have loved to have gotten like a 2-year, $30 million extension prior to basically what they gave J.J. Watt. I would have loved to have given to Chandler Jones prior to the season.
I would have loved to have gotten that, honestly. But on to one more sponsor here. In these uncertain times, life is full of questions. Like, when should I start thinking about life insurance? But however difficult these questions may be, Western Southern can help you answer them. Backed by over 130 years of experience, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind. Western Southern Financial Group, life insurance, retirement, and investments. Big shout out to Western and Southern, a proud sponsor of the Tailgate Podcast. podcast. I changed the name of one of yours here.
Yeah.
You called this the I Effed Up Watch. We had a comment on YouTube and a comment on Apple Podcasts saying he likes to listen to the podcast around his kids. Let's think about the kids.
Okay.
We don't have to, we do drop some F-bombs, some S-bombs, whatever.
Can we get it bleeped
Do
out?
they even say S-bombs? Regardless. We don't have to name a segment with a curse word in it. I don't think we have to be that degenerate.
It's a whiff watch.
So Whiff Watch. Who is someone you whiffed on now looking back on your draft boards?
Yeah, this one's been a whiff watch, but I had hoped at some point in time there would be, I don't know, say breakout, but it would have justified it. But Jordan Lewis, fifth-year cornerback, Dallas Cowboys, was the 24th overall player in PFF's draft board back in 2017. Had some exceptional plays in coverage there at Michigan, was great in man, but was a undersized, limited athlete. That's the combo that you worry about in the NFL. And now he really is not much more, never going to be much more, in my opinion, than a pure man slot cornerback. And that doesn't have a ton of necessarily value in the NFL this past week against Tampa Bay. 35.2 coverage grade. He had the pick. That was on the Hail Mary. Gave up a touchdown in that game. Just has not lived up to that billing.
What percentage of the PFF whiffs, specifically from like the 2017, 2018, and maybe even the 2019 NFL draft boards before you had full control, would you argue, what percentage of the whiffs would you argue because of not completely addressing or properly factoring in height, weight, and athleticism? Because I think a lot of those early draft boards were so predicated on he graded really well and looked really good.
Production.
Yeah, production. It was production.
We wanted the grades to be predictive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the grades are predictive in some ways.
Yeah.
There are some like pass rushing grades, pass block grades, run block grades. We see a lot of predictive power in those. But I think as the years have progressed and why draft boards I think have improved, haven't been so much because you're in control, but I think there has been this collective realization at PFF that, hey, wait a second. Athleticism, size, all that stuff needs to be heavily factored in to our scouting process because of level of competition, because of if you're not a top 50, top 75 percentile athlete, it's very difficult to have success in the NFL. That's just a fact. Yeah. That's a fact. And Eric Eager, and I brought this up 1,000 times, VP of Research and Development, has looked at some of the most predictive data we have access to from college and NFL, and time again, it's things like height, weight, speed score, athleticism score, stuff that is actually controllable from college to the NFL. I do think that those early draft boards, guys that we really liked, Higgins, Lewis, Scooby Wright. I mean, there's these guys that they graded really well and were productive, but man, you need athletes to win the NFL. And did we find some gems? Trey Flowers, Grady Jarrett, absolutely. But I do think a lot of those whiffs, specifically from those early draft boards, were just late to factoring in legitimate athletic or physical tools.
Agreed.
I agree. That's it. That's all you got. All right, breakout watch. Darrell Taylor of the Seattle Seahawks.
Whew. Darrell Taylor obviously didn't play all his rookie season because of injury. This past week against Indy, 90.5 pass rushing grade, had one of the best pass rushes of the week where he pancaked Braden Smith, a right tackle who just got paid big bucks there for Indy. And no trip, no running back clipping his heel, no stepping on a guy's foot, just a pure bull rush that put Braden Smith on his back that you don't see too often. So 90.5 pass rushing grade was obviously only 12 pass rushing snaps, 26 total snaps, not a whole huge sample size, but you can't fake that kind of explosiveness, that kind of power against a right tackle like Braden Smith. You're going to have something there to do that. So I'm excited to see what he puts on tape because Seattle's defensive line was dominating, and not just Julian Davenport, some other guys on that offensive line.
Yeah, I think their defensive line as a whole really did exceed expectations. Darrell Taylor, Alton Robinson among the group that did a big breakout for Darrell Taylor. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite segments we're doing weekly now, because every week you're going to have to add another piece here. First round lock, break down who you've already added to the first round lock list for the 2022 NFL Draft and who you're adding this week.
Start with Kayvon Thibodeau, Oregon defensive end. Went to Derek Stingley Jr., the LSU cornerback, then Evan Neal, the Alabama offensive tackle, and the fourth one that I'm adding, like I said, I hinted at it earlier, Aiden Hutchinson.
Really?
Aiden Hutchinson's first round lock. That athletic going up against another NFL tackle and beating him to that degree, he's going to go in the first round.
Wow. I did not expect Aiden Hutchinson would be this early on the list.
I didn't either, but he's been exceptional this year. Truly has been coming back from that broken leg.
Fantastic stuff, Mike. Another episode in the books for the Tailgate Podcast. Remember to make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And ask us questions. Follow PFF_tailgate on Twitter. Send us a DM or leave us a question on Apple Podcasts to get that answered on the Thursday episode here on Tailgate. Until next time, Gayle, Mike Renner, producer Mike Quinn, producer Max Chadwick, Tailgate.